In this video, we will walk you through the Request for Quote module, a popular B2B e-commerce feature recently integrated into the Kart-powered platform. Kart, a multi-vendor e-commerce platform, makes it easier than ever for buyers and sellers to connect for custom or bulk orders, simplifying negotiations and improving the overall purchasing experience on the platform. The RFQ feature offers two distinct flows to facilitate quote requests. The first is the standard or private RFQ flow, which allows buyers to send quotes to specific sellers based on the submission level. This flow will always be governed via the product detail page. RFQs received by the seller under this flow are subject to the field settings configured by the admin for the RFQ submission level. The second is the global or public RFQ flow, which allows buyers to send their request for quotes to a broader range of sellers on the platform. This approach particularly benefits the buyers seeking competitive pricing or exploring broader sourcing options. To activate these flows on the platform, the admin must first configure the settings. Begin by logging into the admin panel, then select Settings located under the left navigation menu. Then, choose System Configurations to access the System Configurations page, where a list of tabs will be displayed on the left. Use the search bar to quickly search the Request for Quote tab or scroll down to find it. Once located, select the Request for Quote tab to access the associated settings. Begin by activating the RFQ functionality on the platform. To do this, turn on the main RFQ module toggle switch. Once this is done, click Save to apply the changes. It is recommended to reload the page after saving to ensure that the settings are implemented and the updates reflect on the platform. With this, the RFQ-related settings become configurable and applicable. Additionally, the RFQ feature will appear in the left navigation menu of the admin panel. The activation also makes the standard RFQ flow operational on the platform. In addition, the admin can further define how the standard RFQ flow will work on the platform by configuring other related settings, including hide product prices, an Add to Cart button, RFQ submission level, and admin's manual approval on new RFQs. Also, for the Global RFQ flow, the Global RFQ module needs to be activated along with the main RFQ module, since the Global RFQ module's whole functionality depends on the activation of the main RFQ module. Let us examine both processes separately and all these settings one by one to understand their impacts accordingly. If the main RFQ setting is activated by the admin, it will activate the standard RFQ feature for both sellers and buyers. For sellers, this feature will be optional, giving them the discretion to decide whether to activate the RFQ feature for their shop or not. Sellers can access these settings through the Manage Shop submodule accessible under the Shop module, and search this field under the General tab. Once the seller activates this setting for their shop, only then can buyers submit standard RFQs for the products listed in that seller's shop. Additionally, sellers can hide product prices from the product detail page for any inventory of their product. To do this, they need to go to the Shop Inventory submodule, navigate to the Product Inventory Setup page, set the order type to RFQ only, and check the box for Hide Product Price from the Product Detail page. When this setting is implemented, the product prices and the Add to Cart feature will be hidden, and only the Request for Quote feature will be visible on the product detail page for that specific product. It is important to note that this setting will only work if the admin has deactivated the Hide Product Prices and Add to Cart feature within the RFQ settings. If the admin activates this feature, it will override the seller's discretion to activate the RFQ feature for their shops. In such cases, the setting will apply to all products in the seller's shop, meaning buyers will not be able to view the product prices. Additionally, the Add to Cart feature will be hidden, and only the Request for Quote option will appear on the product detail page. Let's look at how a buyer can submit a request for quote through the standard RFQ flow. To begin, the buyer must first visit the product detail page of the specific product for which they wish to submit a quotation request. Then, they must select the seller under Meet Your Sellers to whom they want to send the quotation request. If the selected seller has activated the RFQ feature for their shop, the Request for Quote option will appear on the product detail page next to the product image. When the buyer clicks the Request for Quote option, a form will appear in which they are required to fill out the necessary details to submit the request. After submission, an RFQ ID will be generated. If the buyer wants to view and manage the RFQ they placed, they can do so through their buyer panel by navigating to the Orders module and then selecting the Request for Quotes submodule. A list of placed RFQs will appear, with the latest one at the top. For the offers quoted by sellers, buyers can view them on the Buyer Offers page. The state view is scrollable. Scroll to the left, then click the Offers button to open the Offers page. Here buyers can review the quoted offers by the seller. As of now, no offer has been quoted by the seller, so the offer page is currently empty. Next, let's understand how sellers can quote an offer and manage standard RFQ requests submitted by buyers. To begin, sellers must navigate through the Sales module and then select the Request for Quotes submodule. Under this page, sellers can review all the standard RFQ requests submitted by buyers. To review the details of a specific RFQ request, the seller needs to scroll the state view to the left and then click the View button. Once the View button is clicked, a detailed view of the RFQ will appear on the right, allowing the seller to access all relevant information about the request. Next, to place an offer for the specific RFQ request, the seller must click the Offers button located beside the view. This will open the Seller Offers page. Since no offer has been quoted yet, the offer page will initially be empty. To quote an offer, the seller must click New Offer, which will open the RFQ offer form on the right. The seller must fill in all the necessary details. One important setting within this form is the seller's discretion regarding whether to allow the buyer to negotiate further with a counteroffer. If the seller wishes to allow this, they can turn on the buyer can negotiate the offer toggle switch. Activating this toggle will grant the buyer the ability to submit a counteroffer on the placed RFQ. On the other hand, if the toggle switch is turned off, the buyer will not have the option to place any counteroffer. Once all the details are filled in and the preferences are set, the seller can click Save. After the offer is placed, the seller can edit the offer details by clicking Edit. Kindly noted that the seller cannot accept, reject, or give approval to the offer until the buyer takes action on the offer quoted by the seller. If the seller wishes to cancel the request they quoted, they can click Remove to delete their offer on the RFQ. To view the offer history, the seller can click Offer Log, where all actions related to the offer are displayed. For viewing or sending attachments, click the Attachments. If the seller wishes to communicate with the buyer, they can click Messages to send a direct message. Additionally, to check the shipping charges for the product, the seller can click Shipping Rates for detailed information. Next, let's see how a buyer can accept, reject, or place a counteroffer for the offer quoted by the seller. To place a counteroffer, buyer must click Reply. This will open the RFQ offer form on the right side, allowing the buyer to fill in the necessary negotiation details. Once done, click Save. After placing the counteroffer, the buyer can edit their offer by clicking Edit. Once buyers place a counteroffer, they are unable to accept or reject the seller's offer until the seller takes action on the counteroffer submitted by the buyer. Both the buyer and seller can negotiate and place multiple counteroffers on the placed RFQ until a conclusion is reached. However, if the seller has turned off the toggle switch next to Buyer can negotiate the offer, the reply button will not appear for the buyer. In such cases, the buyer will be limited to only accepting or rejecting the seller's offer, without the ability to make a counteroffer. If the buyer finds a suitable offer for the requested product or decides not to proceed with the product request, they can mark the RFQ as closed by clicking the Close. Next, let's understand what happens when either the buyer or seller accepts or rejects an offer. If the seller accepts the buyer's offer, the Buy Now option will appear under the buyer's offer page in place of the Accept or Reject. From there, the buyer can proceed with the regular purchasing process for the agreed amount and quantity requested. On the other hand, if the buyer accepts the seller's offer, the Buy Now option will remain unclickable until the seller provides final approval. The final acceptance is given by the seller. The seller must click Approve to finalize the offer. Once the seller approves the offer, the Buy Now option will become clickable for the buyer, allowing them to proceed with the regular buying process. After the offer is accepted, the buyer will have the option to download the RFQ copy of the product requested. To do this, the buyer must return to the Request for Quotes submodule. Once on the page, the buyer must scroll the state view to the left. Besides the Offers button of the accepted RFQ, they will find the Download button. Clicking this button will allow the buyer to download the RFQ copy of the product requested. Next, let's have a look at the RFQ submission level feature within the RFQ settings. This feature is applicable only when the buyer initiates a request for a quote using the standard RFQ flow. To set the RFQ submission level, click the drop-down field, and the list will appear. If the RFQ submission level is set to individual by the admin, RFQs will be sent only to the specific seller whose product is selected on the product detail page for the standard or private RFQ submission. If the RFQ submission level is set to variant by the admin, RFQs will be sent to all the sellers having inventory managed for that variant, irrespective of the fact which seller's product variant is being displayed on the product detail page. If the RFQ submission level is set to catalog by the admin, RFQs are sent to all the sellers having inventory managed for any variant of that product, irrespective of the fact which seller's product is being displayed on the product detail page. This is how the standard flow works between the seller and the buyer. Moving forward, let's understand the Global RFQ flow. To implement the Global RFQ functionality on the platform, the admin must activate the Global RFQ module along with the main RFQ module. Once both settings are activated, the Global RFQ functionality becomes accessible and operational for both the sellers and the buyers. To place a Global RFQ, the buyers must visit the marketplace. Then on the upper right corner of the top navigation bar, they will find the Request for Quote. Clicking this will open the Global RFQ form, where buyers are required to provide all the necessary details related to their request. Next, the targeted suppliers must be selected. Choosing Public will send the request to all sellers on the platform, while choosing the Favorite Sellers or Select Sellers option will direct the request to specific sellers. To select specific sellers, select the field under Suppliers and either type in or select the sellers from the suggested list that appears based on the targeted supplier's selection. Once all the necessary details have been filled out, clicking Submit will submit the Global RFQ. A confirmation page will then appear, showing that the request for a quote has been submitted successfully, along with the RFQ ID generated. For the Global RFQ placed by buyers, they can review it the same as a standard RFQ under the Request for Quote submodule. Next, let's understand how sellers can quote an offer and manage Global RFQs submitted by the buyers. To begin, sellers must navigate to the Sales module and then select the Global Request for Quote submodule. The process for handling Global RFQs is mostly similar to the standard RFQ process. However, there are a few key differences that sellers should be aware of. Sellers must first manually assign themselves the specific Global RFQ for which they want to quote an offer. To do this, they should scroll the state view to the left and click the Assign to Me button located beside the view. By doing so, the Global RFQ will be assigned to that seller. Once the button is clicked, the Offers button will appear in that place. By clicking the Offers button, the Seller Offers page will open, where sellers can proceed with the quotation process. Since this is a Global RFQ, sellers must first link their inventory for the requested product. To accomplish this, they need to click the Link Inventory option, search or locate the product inventory, select it, or add the product inventory if not available. After completing this, sellers must click Save. To review the added inventory, sellers can hover over the information icon. If any updates or changes need to be made, they can click Change Inventory, which will appear in place of the link inventory. To have a glance over the RFQ details, sellers can click View. The further process for placing a new offer and the seller's discretion regarding the buyer can negotiate the offer toggle will be the same as in the standard RFQ offer form. By following this process, other sellers can also send their quotations to the buyer on the placed Global RFQ. Once the buyer receives quotations from multiple sellers, they will be able to review and compare the quoted offers among the sellers. This comparison allows the buyer to decide whether they want to negotiate further with any specific seller or accept the offer that best suits their requirements. The process of placing a counteroffer, accepting or rejecting an offer, or marking it as closed will follow the same procedure as seen earlier in the standard RFQ flow. Just like with the standard RFQ, the final acceptance will be given by the seller, allowing the buyer to proceed with the normal buying process. However, if the seller accepts the buyer's counteroffer, the buyer can proceed with the normal buying process by simply clicking Buy Now. Next, let's understand the impact of turning on the admin's manual approval on new RFQ toggle switch. This setting will apply to both standard and global RFQs. When this setting is activated, any new RFQ request submitted by a buyer will require the admin's manual approval before it can move forward in the process. This step ensures that all RFQs are reviewed and validated by the admin before they progress to the next stage. To manage the admin approval process, the admin must navigate to the RFQ module and then select the Request for Quote submodule. On this page, the admin has full control over buyer-seller interactions, including the ability to manage ongoing, approved, or rejected RFQs, and to facilitate negotiations between buyers and sellers. To review the details of any specific RFQ, the admin can click the View button located in the Action column. After reviewing the RFQ details, the admin can decide to either accept or reject the RFQ based on the information provided by the buyer. Once the RFQ is accepted, it will be automatically categorized and reflected under the seller's Request for Quote or Global Request for Quote submodules. Admin can manage the offers through the Admin Offers page. By clicking the Offers button, the admin can access the offer page, where they can review, approve, or take any necessary actions regarding the offers submitted by sellers. For the admin, the flow of negotiation and offer quotation remains the same as explained earlier for both standard and global RFQs within the seller's shop. This is how the newly integrated RFQ features work, creating a smooth and efficient interaction between buyers and sellers. The RFQ flow simplifies the process of requesting and negotiating quotes, making it easier for both sides to handle custom and bulk orders with ease. Ready to take your e-commerce business to the next level? Kart has everything you need to build a successful marketplace. Book a demo today to get started.